It came across my desk, just as anything else would. Amidst the downpour of letters requiring replies and dossiers demanding signatures, I finally had the time to pass through it. Something that shouldn't have demanded my personal attention, I would think. Personnel and equipment authorizations were managed at the level of field command. But there it was. I ran my letter opener across the breadth of the envelope and retrieved the communiqué from within. One last thing before heading off to the opera. It wasn't a ludicrous request in itself, but I feared that my lack of expertise on the matter required that I summon someone with a deeper understanding. Rising from my desk and striding towards the doorman, it was simple enough to put through a request to the telegraphist. Perhaps relying on others, apprehensive as I was to do so, was the more prudent course of action. The evening grew ever nearer, and it would be poor form to demand the presence of a working man outside of business hours. Nevertheless, he appeared as requested. He entered with proper courtesy, and I bid him take a seat on the chaise. Brandy was offered, and declined. Straight to business, then. The doorman conscientiously opened the window in my office as I struck the match for my cigar. My guest again declined to participate. He seemed agitated, but willing to entertain my inquiries despite the late hour. I handed him the missive, and I saw an apprehension in his eyes as he passed through the words. I opened the discussion with the most pertinent question. Is it advisable?
In what sense?
In the general sense.
I've been instructed by my employer not to give my opinion without authorization.
He's got quite the leash on you. Do you bark when he enters your office? That was rude of me, but he took my point in stride.
If you aren't aiming for me to provide a written analysis, I can be more candid.
While the walls in these regal halls might have ears, the door is closed. That's the best measure of confidentiality I can offer you at this time. He produced a handkerchief from his coat and cleaned the lenses of his spectacles before turning upward to meet my gaze.
The chief concern is security, I would say. These are highly experimental machines, and it was the legislature's position that they not be used outside of controlled circumstances.
Was Eros a controlled circumstance?
Let go.
He and I stared at one another, and in the midst of that silence were all the words we could not speak.
I would have described it as a field trial.
And one that proved successful in your mind?
Indeed.
Placing my cigar into the divot on my ashtray freed my hand and allowed me to take grasp of the dispatch from the other side of the world. I don't care for them, you know.
Who, sir?
The Asiatics.
Certainly, no civilized man could blame you for that.
My point is that there isn't a sufficient trust between us and them that would warrant my granting their request. I pored back over the words. Despite the nature of its origin, the language was well written. Comprehensibility was a surprise, but its fluency was astounding. When their delegation came and delivered the trees that now blossom in the garden, I didn't think much of them. Short fellows with that jaundiced look wearing good suits with cravats that looked entirely out of place compared to their visage. But all the while one could tell that they were taking it all in. More than one joke was proffered that if they found our own capital so wondrous that they might fall prostrate when they came to London.
Might I offer some argument as to why you might respond to them in the affirmative?
By all means.
I spoke with Major General Meckel when he returned some months ago. He holds them in high esteem. They've adapted remarkably to the new situation, even their loss of a portion of their territory to the denizens of the deep. Of all of the people to whom a provision of this sort might be offered, they certainly aren't the worst candidate.
Yes, I've heard Meckel's diatribes on the subject. One might think they intend to immortalize him in bronze, if his own words are to be believed. But you're contradicting your earlier point regarding security concerns.
Not at all. There would be a certain plausible deniability in it. Fulfilling such a request need not be something mentioned in our records, logistical, legislative, or otherwise. It could be done clandestinely. Moreover, perhaps, they're the least of our worries, insofar as a contest of nations should be concerned.
An engineer and politician both, it would seem. It would be poor form to swipe these assets from under the nose of your employer. He would be a poor man to have angered by clandestine action, as you say.
I have a firm belief that his concerns could be soothed. Alfred is running a business, and despite the protestations of this government, is willing to have his creations cross oceans and borders. so long as there is money to be made.
I handed him the damnable letter back and took up my cigar. Did you read this in its entirety when I handed it to you?
A brief skimming. My being accustomed to working with technical data has stilted my willingness to read for pleasure.
They're not offering us any money. They offer something more important, perhaps. His eyes pierced through the words once again, and his eyebrows raised as he found the passage that I had been referring to.
Far be it from me to offer diplomatic counsel, but what they offer isn't of substantive benefit to us at the present time.
But it could be, eventually.
I cannot postulate as to that end. I firmly stand in the camp that fosters goodwill between nations, but I would think that the Minister-President might offer some better advice in this regard.
The Minister-President is a good man, a smart man, but he is also an old man, and at some point I will have to step out of his shadow. Perhaps granting authorization here might be an opportunity.
This is above my station, sir. All I can offer as to your initial request is that what is being asked is technically feasible. The exterior implications and feasibility are matters for which you should consult others.
It is rare enough, in this position, in this country even, to find men sufficiently humble to admit when they are insufficiently informed, or even to admit when they are wrong. He laid the missive down on the table before us and leaned backwards in a rare demonstration of comfort.
I've missed the opportunities I had working directly with you, Your Majesty.
And I have missed your sound counsel, Herr Diesel.
Might I be entirely honest with you?
I would hope you've been entirely honest with me since you sat down.
We have a selection of models that are needing some improvement. They function well enough, but the strides we have made in the metallurgical sciences indicate to us that we sit on the cusp of a new innovation. The models that I speak of were destined to be cannibalized for repairs and refitting.
Our men of fortune down below are so often in need of welfare.
Indeed. If these models were to depart from the yards at Protse at the regular time towards a port, it would be entirely reasonable to make the impression that they are headed down below for their intended use.
And, instead of heading below, perhaps they venture eastward. His face gave rise to a smile. That Catholic conniving tendency within you still has some use, I see. The smile quickly dissipated. I rose and took the letter back towards my desk. Men in your profession should learn to recognize humor when you hear it. Perhaps it was the lateness of the hour that prompted me to give approval rather than Diesel's advice. The chronometer on my desk began its metallic pinging, signaling that my time was running short if I was to meet my beloved before our journey to the box at the theater. I retrieved my seal but struggled to find it. Running my hands through the drawers and rummaging about proved unsuccessful. Tempted to call for the doorman to bring me another, or at least a pen to bear signature, the cause for its absence became apparent when a webbed hand reached over my shoulder and bore it towards me.
Blub.
Thank you, Heinrich. The order was signed without difficulty. Not anymore. All the same, the habits of my friend required that he pour the wax across the lips of the envelope. It was always a matter of humoring him in this, as I was perfectly capable of performing the task myself. With this final matter sorted, I rose once again and beckoned the doorman to drape my overcoat properly. Diesel approached and offered his hand, and I took it. And despite the presence of the help, I drew him in for a masculine embrace and released him just as quickly. We stepped out together, recalling those shared moments in the worlds beneath. His new position as Chief Technical Officer permitted him more time away from the suffocation of the offices and testing grounds. Progress, even during my brief absence, was made in his fields. Despite my lack of interest in the purely scientific, and often purely theoretical, I enjoyed the conversation we shared on the drive as we waited for the motor carriages. Eventually, my driver arrived. The door was opened, and I entered in short order, but not before giving one final request to my last-minute guest. Do keep me apprised of the success of this little mission, won't you? He huddled beneath that woolen greatcoat and gave the appropriate nod.
As His Majesty desires.
I closed the door to the Daimler, and I never pondered that letter again.
Do you think that he'll let us out early?
Not a chance. Rest and reprieve are another 3 hours out.
Is that why you bought the timepiece? To keep track of Ishimura beating us to death?
No, I thought that I might want to know the exact time I can watch your sister at the onsen. A sharp shout cut through the dialogue that would have otherwise led to a break in the drill formation.
Hadashi, Nakamura, shut your fucking holes.
The drill instructor loomed at the periphery of the square of men, whose exhaustion from the 2 hours of continuous and organized motion was not yet visible on their faces, but weighed heavy in their minds. It was never particularly enjoyable, marching orders repeatedly around the open plaza, but the necessity of ordered motion was understood by most, if not all, the men that took part. The training rifles, light as they were by comparison to the hefty bulk of the Murata, would still bruise the shoulders after a day of exercises. It was almost impossible to decipher the instructor's cadence. All of the words seemed to slur together into one contiguous sound. By anticipating the movement of the men around me, it became easier to move in synchronicity with the rest of them. When we would eventually receive postings and move out from the parade ground to the battlefield, these lessons in discipline would surely prove their worth. Then the universe decided that today would have an unfortunate turn. The command went out. Perhaps it was the sun in my eyes, as I couldn't determine where the rifle sat in relation to my left breast. I brought it close and tight above the elbow, per the manuals that we were all given but never bothered to read. When our square turned to the right, and the tiled roof of our barracks obscured the fading afternoon light, it became obvious that a mistake had been made. Everyone else had shouldered right. He was on me before I had a chance to correct myself. A white-gloved hand hooked under my collar and pulled me out of the block, with such force that I nearly fell before my boot heels grinding against the stones of the drill square kept me upright. Never look him in the eye. Vision straight ahead. Even if you're looking into the visage of death, never look him in the eye.
Private Nakamura, what are you trying to do to my beloved battalion?
Sir, I don't know, sir.
I understand that the dog fuckers that they call men from the Shiga prefecture are the dumbest in all the empire, but you do not expect me to believe that you never learned left from right.
Don't rise to him. Don't do it. Just give him the answer.
Did you deliberately fail to become uniform with your brothers?
No, sir.
Then you want to be different. You want to be special.
His left hook slammed into my left cheek. Sharp pain. While he was otherwise an orderly man, Ishimura enjoyed meting out his discipline. The skin on the inside of my mouth cut itself against the surface of my teeth, and I could taste the iron of my blood seeping out onto my tongue.
What side was that, Private Nakamura?
Left side, sir?
Are you sure, Private Nakamura?
Yes, sir. I anticipated what would come next, but it did nothing to mitigate the pain. From the right this time. My cap had been unseated from its place on my head and drooped to the right from the force of the impact. Had my chin strap not been securely fastened, it would have fallen, and likely worsened the situation.
Do not shame this formation with your shit-dripping antics ever again, or I will punish you properly. Secure your cap and return to the block.
I waited for him to turn back to the formation before I scurried back into place. Never turn your back to an officer. The rest of the battalion, sufficiently cowed by the controlled violence, remained silent and still as statues until the sergeant drew his saber and began his incomprehensible cadence of commands. Another hour or so before the final call to arrest. Ishimura returned his blade to his hip, and the clacking of 200 wooden heels snapping together, and the silence of the Seiritsu towards our instructor heralded relief. The block then broke apart, as our barracks keepers began to light lanterns to illuminate the now darkened drill square. A big guy from our company, whose name I still can't remember, slid open the doors, and we all filed in, finally, at our own pace. Loosening the strap of my cover, I ran my hand over the sides of my face. Strangely, no blood coated my hands, but the taste within my mouth remained. I found my rack at the far end, in this new home that we all shared, and took my seat on my cot.
Are you all right?
Looking upwards, Hadashi had taken an interest. The spectacles that he wore reflected that orange light that poured through the windows in the barracks. It was nice to receive some commiseration from my brothers, and this one particularly, despite my earlier comments regarding his sister. I felt around the back of my jaw, ensuring that all the bones were still in place. He has a hard hand. I think he keeps his signet ring on under his glove to give us a bit more pain.
He's a hard bastard.
I leaned forward to begin unwrapping my puttees, and Hadashi sat on his cot across from me, after satisfying himself that I wasn't catatonic. We were Konoe. We were the best. Well, we were going to be the best after our training was done. Our review of my discipline continued.
He hit Takahashi in the stomach when he tripped over a dropped bayonet frog. Ishimura didn't bother finding the man who dropped it, but he struck Takahashi so hard that he spent 2 weeks in the infirmary.
Was he killed?
Takahashi?
No. The fellow that dropped the frog.
That never got figured out. Takahashi got a medical discharge. Back to his lovely wife in Okayama.
We should all be so lucky. A low chuckle and some snickers reverberated through the dormitory, indicating that our discussion had gathered an audience.
Will you come out tonight? 2 weeks out from the passing through ceremony, and we haven't seen much of you outside this hellhole.
I might. Where are you going?
Out.
His lack of specifics intrigued me. It's not good of you to be out whoring. Looks poorly on the battalion.
Only if we get caught.
The clips that held my leg wraps on finally came away, and there was a certain pleasure that came from taking the pressure away from my calf muscles. We were permitted to leave and wander Chiyoda-ku at the end of a week, so long as we put in the requests. We all did, every week, but we didn't all leave at once. There was a certain pacing to it. Informally, one company took up the, albeit not required, custodial duties that our positions merited, while select men from the others took off into town. Never the same man 2 weeks in a row. Who else is going? Hadashi set his boots down on the hard wood of the tatami beneath us, and answered me.
Several of the guys from the artillery group, 2 or 3 of the Marines from the docks, you and me.
I haven't said I would go yet.
Oh, but you will.
After tamping in my tunic, unfolding my trousers, and returning them to the safety of the trunk beneath my cot, I passed through it to find my going-out clothes. These foreign suits are something else, too tight around the neck in my mind. Every man in this company when we were young remembered the wafuku, the kimono of our mothers and sisters, evening robes and day tunics. Those always certainly breathed a bit more than the woolen trousers and cravat that bound a man up like a dressed chicken. So much has changed since I was a child. I never believed a thought like that would pass my mind until I grew old, but even at 19, I felt the world slowly passing me by. I secured the final coat button into place. Well, Hadashi put on some mocking, womanly effectuation.
Oh, sir, how handsome you are. Have you come from England to whisk me away from this barbaric land?
Quit being an arsewipe, and tell me how it looks.
You look fine. Are you ready?
As I'll ever be. We strode out proudly, and the kempe at the gate, an older man who had probably seen more than his fair share of drunken madness, waved us through and out into town. The winter had finally begun to give way to spring, but the chill in the air remained. A half-kilometer distant, the lights of Chiyoda beckoned. As we walked, the men from the artillery crew yelled for us to wait up, and the Riku made their way up from the southbound road, until our little pair swelled to a group of a dozen or more. Chatting mindlessly regarding the rigorous training, we went along without a care. While the changes that had come over the whole of the country are visible, there is still a portion of old Nippon that stands out. The rustling of the paper shades of windows that were being shuttered by the locals to keep out the evening wind. The local prefecture banners, still flapping proud, but overshadowed by flags with their red sphere and white background. The velocipedes that coursed over the cobblestones, their young riders speeding through the old streets listlessly. We all know that we are doing the Emperor service by defending his realm, but everywhere we look are the indications that we have already succumbed to an invasion. It began at the tavern. The poor proprietor has been the subject of our repeated assaults by now, and had always made efforts to set down more barrels such that all of us could be seated on the row. Our pay was always enough to keep him from shuttering his doors to us, but there was a certain look of fear that developed on his face when we entered. I found myself in the middle seat, between Hadashi and a Riku that hadn't introduced himself yet. Eventually that old fellow made his way through one end, and the porcelain decanter made its way down to me. I poured, and sent it down its way towards the artilleryman. When I slid it down the counter, the Riku next to me turned and gave a greeting.
Good evening, Ensign Hakamori.
Private Nakamura. A pleasure. We shook hands, and he turned back to his fellows. In turn, I maneuvered onto Hadashi, who was sucking down the rice wine quite quickly. When we're done with the training, where do you want to be posted? He set the cup down on the counter and produced from his pocket a handful of yen and pushed them towards the proprietor. I couldn't have counted them all if I tried. Our provisioner quickly scooped them up and shuffled back behind the counter to go find some larger vessel to hold the liquor my comrade had suddenly paid for. Perhaps there's a bathtub somewhere in the back.
Taiwan, ideally. Sunshine and beaches. Native women. Garrison duty.
We're the guard. Garrison duty isn't our job.
Where do you think we will go then?
Hokkaido, I would think.
You want to fight demons, keep drinking, and they'll come to you. No need to go up north.
There was a certain stone wall that you would hit when you spoke to men in the army about Hokkaido. Even being the best of the best didn't mitigate the fear. When Mount Uzu opened up and disgorged its devils, I was a child. I didn't think about it much at all. Now, when speaking to superiors or colleagues, the word evoked a feeling of loss, and after some contemplation, a burning desire for revenge. The decanter slid over to me, and I continued to drink. Have you come into some money, Hadashi? You've paid for the barkeep's children to all attend university at the rate you're going.
My parents own a weaving house. Several, actually. Papa sends me a little bit at the end of the month, and I've kept it saved for the last year.
Planning on a big purchase?
Nothing yet. You haven't thanked me for covering you so far.
Arigato.
Don't thank me just yet. We aren't done.
He gestured towards the barkeep, who leaned in over the counter, and the two of them exchanged some whispers. Strange enough. In itself. I suppose he wanted him to break out the good stuff, if he was going to float all 12 of us on the counter all night. It was then when I had to turn and give attention to the front door. There they were. It wasn't unheard of to see foreigners in town. There was a certain air of mystery that was slowly dropping away, now that we began to see them more frequently. The port outside the city hosted more of them, I had heard, but they always seemed to venture further and further inward. I wasn't the only one who turned, and the Riku behind me snapped around more quickly than the rest of us. I will say that they largely tend to look the same. Horizontal striped undershirt, blue trousers and loose tunics. Beards and heads of hair of more colors than our own people ever featured. Smoking their pipes and bandying about just like we did, but with less dignity. Unseemly wide eyes. Couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 of them, judging by the plethora of heads that stood behind their leading man. A muffled discourse made its way down the counter, as we turned back away from them. Gaijin sailors?
What brings them here? Are the whores near the docks all walking bow-legged already?
Should we show them the door?
Quit staring. They'll come over if you keep at it. Once again, I supped from the porcelain and slid it to my new navy acquaintance. Every one of us sat a little straighter, heads turning just enough to see the front of the tavern in our periphery. It didn't take long for a plan to be formulated and then discarded. We were the Imperial Guard, trainees at least. We don't scuffle with outsiders in grimy alleys. They might be so inclined, but we won't stoop so low. Not without provocation. The proprietor made his way out from behind the counter and attended to them, seated just a meter or two behind us. Their command of our language was grotesque, but there wasn't cause for a row. The commotion that migrated nearer didn't bother us. We made our own. The artilleryman at the far end of the counter got up and poured all of us another drink, but insisted that we wait for the cue. We all threw back another one. I could feel my face getting a bit flushed, but knowing that I wouldn't need to attend to duties tomorrow provided confidence that this could continue. I was going to suggest that we move along, maybe get some food. I swiveled with my hand on Hadashi's shoulder, and his face met mine sooner than I anticipated. He remained seated, just angled backwards, sipping on his beverage and staring at a gaijin seated at the head of the table behind us. He continued to stare as the words flew from him in a pointed whisper.
That one's staring right at me.
And you're staring right at him. Just turn around, you dolt.
No, I don't think I will. This place is ours, not theirs.
This place is the proprietor's, and they seem to be paying him just fine. Leave it be. I grabbed at his arm and tried to get him to turn around, but he wouldn't move. I guessed that if we all continued slamming down drinks, Hadashi's drunkenness might prevent him from doing something stupid. I rose above the heads of my neighbors and beckoned the fellas at the end of the counter to start sliding the rice wine back towards us. It eventually made its way in front of us, but still, Hadashi did not turn. I poured him one, directly into the cup he held in his hand as he stared, and one for myself, and sent it downrange. So to say, just as we did, the foreigners began to grow a little rowdy. They matched our volume, and one or two of them started to sing. The naval cadet on my left turned to me and suggested that we ought to move to the next venue. I attempted to make myself heard over the raucous shouting from behind us, and he seemed to take my words, and turned to his own comrades and gestured that we ought to pay the bill and take our leave. Despite not being the last man to pay, I leaned over the counter and called the proprietor. Has our bill been settled?
Not yet, young man. You've got another 3 or 4 bottles to go.
Oh, perhaps you should just keep it as a gratuity. I think my comrades and I will have to depart.
That's not a problem, but your friend seems to be perfectly fine where he is.
Hadashi continued his staring contest with the gaijin. Just like us, the rest of the foreigners paid us no mind and continued conversing between themselves, but my friend and his seemingly mortal foe were locked in this contest. I grabbed at his arm again, this time quite forcefully, and managed to gain his attention. Our buddies and I are moving on. Are you wanting to be left behind? He paused for a moment, and then gave the answer that I wanted to hear.
Yeah, all right. Let's go.
I turned back to the barkeep, who now filled a tray with more cups, likely for our foreign counterparts, judging by the number, and hastily brought it around, approached their table, and started distributing them. The one that Hadashi had been staring at, now that he had won his little game, turned to the proprietor when he asked for payment. We had all begun to file out. The Navy guys first, when the argument between the gaijin and the barkeep reached a crescendo. The barkeep, holding out his hand, and attempting to explain that the gaijin owed about 12 yen more than he had paid, was treated with a certain gesture of disrespect. The foreigner that Hadashi had been staring at took his hands, raised them to the sides of his head, and drew his facial skin backwards, thinning his eyes in a horrific dissimulation of our people's visage, tilting back and forward in his chair, and then finally standing to loom above the poor proprietor. The mocking continued for several moments, and our buddies and I stood there, aghast at the display. The mocking was promptly interrupted when Hadashi split a ceramic serving tray in half over the gaijin's head. This was not undeserved, but was also highly inappropriate. Seeing one of their own fall to the floor, one of the taller foreigners grappled Hadashi across the waist and shoved him towards the wall, his head smacking against the end of a table as the two of them began to wrestle along the floor. Hakamori grabbed a stool that was close to his left, and with both hands, swung it into the stomach of another gaijin sailor, who recoiled and then began swinging fists straight back at him. The rest of the Navy went in to help him, and things began to escalate. The other customers, civilians that lived locally, I guessed, quickly left and started shouting that there was a battle ongoing. Before I jumped into the fray, I turned to see the barkeep send his serving boy, who couldn't have been older than 12, out the back entrance. The artillery guys who had joined us started in on the enemy, grabbing and punching. For all the glorious victories that we learned about in the academy, it is a shock to see how ungracefully men fight without weapons. Hadashi now tried to roll away from his own opponent, who eventually succeeded in wrapping his hands around my friend's neck. Without thinking, I rushed over and kicked the gaijin in the head. I heard a crack and felt an awful pain in my foot, but couldn't tell if it was me or the enemy that suffered an injury. The hands that were choking Hadashi slipped away from him as the big bastard slumped over onto the floor, and I reached down and started to drag him away. It was my focus on saving my comrade that prevented me from turning and seeing the outsider who brought his fist to bear against the side of my head. The world spun for a moment, and I felt the warm wooden texture of the floor on my cheek. Hadashi had taken to responding in kind, pummeling my attacker across the surface of one of the low tables closest to us. The commotion of the combat filled the air, and it was impossible to tell who was winning. A shot fired from the tavern's entrance brought silence with it, with the more focused fellows still giving the last couple of punches before the Kempe decided to intervene. I rose too rapidly, and with my balance disturbed by the blow to my head, was forced to take hold of the edge of a nearby table to see what had interrupted the mutual combat. The next shout was Japanese, and I felt a mixture of dread and happiness at hearing it.
Stop this foolishness, or the next one will go through your fucking head.
That one old man who watched us walk out now reeled us back in. He shouldered his rifle at Hadashi, who was poised to strike another blow at my attacker but was now frozen in place. His fist fell towards his waist, and he released his grip on the Gaijin's collar. We were all stunned, ourselves and our enemy. It was as though the entire room exhaled in harmony.
Imperial soldiers and sailors, walk out from this establishment now.
As if pulled by instinct, or commitment to obeying orders, we maneuvered towards the voice of command. We all filed straight out, in as close to a march tempo as we could, struck as we were by the drinking. I was the last out, and I could hear the foreigner that Hakamori struck in the stomach start to retch and heave. Our ward closed the door behind me, and kept his rifle at the ready, as he lined us all up.
You have shamed the army and the navy with your stupidity. What are you, men or pigs, to be rolling around in the muck with foreigners?
Not one of us responded.
Which one of you useless sacks of shit started this? Don't blame it on the Gaijin, or I'll run this straight up to the sergeant.
Again, none of us responded. Maybe it was our shared fear of proper punishment. Maybe it was our instinct for self-preservation kicking in, despite how our training tried to set it aside. Hadashi stepped forward, then Hakamori, then the rest of our little group. I did as well. I don't know what possessed me to do it, but I did. In a way, I did feel that we were all equally guilty. It wasn't the outsiders who attacked us, and their provocations to the proprietor did not merit our assault on them. I started it. The words left everyone's lips, not all at the same time, and not with the same tone, or even the same level of enunciation.
Then you will all share a proper punishment.